Welcome back to the program, a new program for all of my listeners that have been tuning into the Seth Rosczewski podcast. We now have Seth Rosczewski After Hours. This is a program where I sit down with local government officials from the South Shore of Massachusetts. And today we have Doug Lapp from Rockland, Massachusetts, the current town administrator. Doug, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the homemade studio. I was going to change it up a little bit for the new program, but we didn't get to that point yet. So
No, this is great. Thanks for having me.
absolutely. I would like to know a little bit more about you before we go into the program itself. Where did you go to university? Where did you go to university? What's your background, and how did you end up becoming a town administrator?
Sure. So it's a little bit of a circuitous route. So I'm originally from upstate New York, but I went to college undergraduate at UMass Amherst. And once I graduated, I went back to New York and I worked in state government there. I worked in the New York State Capitol for the governor's budget office. Also worked after that for the New York State Department of Health and did a number of things there. Ended up getting married in New York to a woman that I originally met at UMass Amherst, who was from Massachusetts. And so once we got married and we're having our first child, that's what brought us back to Massachusetts. And I moved to the Cape. Immediately then started working for state government in Boston for a number of years. And then ultimately with young kids, wanting to work closer to home, I pivoted and transitioned into local government. And my first foray into local government was 21 years ago as the assistant town manager in Sandwich. And I've been working in local government ever since. And I've been the town administrator in Rockland for the last 7 years.
Working for the governor's office. Now, this is sort of a question that I save for the end, and people usually have to think about it for a minute, but I have a feeling that this might be a good time to insert it. Is who's the most impressive person you've met in your professional career? I'm assuming that person might be from the governor's office that we're on the topic. Would it be someone in that field or in that area?
So that's a tough question. I'd want to think more about it, but my initial reaction immediately would actually not be somebody super famous, would not even be an elected official. It would actually be my first manager, my first boss in the governor's budget office back in 1992. He was just brilliant. He was just an incredibly intelligent guy. And that's really where I cut my teeth and I learned so many professional skills, both generic professional skills as well as public policy and government. I really learned from my first manager. His name was Terry Cullen. And I've learned so much from him that I've been able to build on really throughout the rest of my state government and local government career. So,
what's the major difference between state government and local government, working for the state, now working for the town of Rockland?
Yeah.
What are some of the differences there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest one I would say is, and it's going to sound cliche, but it's really true. When you're in local government, the buck stops here. You know, you can't hide and you can't pass off problems or issues to someone else. When you're in state government, really at any level, whether it's the governor's office or a state agency, because I've worked in both, many times you can get a little bit disconnected from the communities that are ultimately getting impacted by decisions, because you're up in a large office building up in the state, in Boston or in Albany, and you go to meetings and decisions get made, but you might not really be as connected as we are in local government, in town hall. Local taxpayers, local residents, they'll come right into my office, they'll call my direct line, and they demand answers, and they should get them, and there's nowhere else to hide or to pawn them off to someone else. When you're in a town hall, the buck stops here, and you have to be very responsive and accountable to local residents in a way that state officials, by virtue of a lot of different dynamics, just don't have that same kind of accountability. I think that's really the biggest thing I'd say.
To the young couple that's watching this right now, maybe they saw it on Facebook or whatever, YouTube, and they're in Abington or East Bridgewater, a local town, maybe they're even further away, and they're just checking out the town's social media groups. How would you describe Rockland? What are the type of people here? What, maybe a little brief history of the town? What is Rockland?
Sure. So, Rockland was originally part of Abington, and it split off, I believe, in 1874. So I would, in Rockland, because again, it was part of a larger town, so it's a geographically smaller community, but it's relatively densely populated. So I almost consider us a little bit semi-urban because we have hotels, we have multi-story apartment buildings, a lot of multifamily housing. So we're relatively, dense. We're 10 square miles, but we have like 18,000 people. And I would describe Rockland, the first words that come to my mind really is community spirit and pride. I've lived in many different places across the country. I've even lived abroad for a period of time, but I've never seen a town, a city with such a strong sense of community spirit and pride like in Rockland.
And what major projects are going on in Rockland right now?
Sure. So there's three major ones that we're in the middle of right now, and in kind of no particular order. I'll start with the fire station project because that's very high profile. Rockland only has one fire station. Again, because we're only 10 square miles, we're able for now to get away with just one station in the middle of town. It's very old. It was built in the 1930s, by FDR's WPA. It was expanded and renovated in the 1970s, and really not much has been done since then. So it's really just past its useful life. It's out of date. It's too small, and it's really not safe for the firefighters we have there. So we have a $26.1 million project approved by voters to construct a new fire station headquarters at the corner of Church and Howard Street, which is the old Lincoln School. And as of today, right now, June 11th, the demolition of that old Lincoln School is actually happening as we speak right now.
I've driven by it. Yeah, I saw it. It kind of shocked me when I drove by because I used to live off of Howard Street, and I was like, "Oh wow, they're actually destroying the building.
Happening.
It's finally happening."
Yep. And for anybody has that question, just so everyone's aware, we had the building fully remediated before the demolition. So, asbestos and any other hazardous materials, we had a complete inventory done. And we had a licensed contractor remove any hazardous materials. So I know that question's come up. So we can talk more about that if you want, but the fire station project's a big one. The next one is the Bicentennial Track project. That was also approved by voters at town meeting. And that's a $3 million project to completely rebuild the track, the grass athletic field in the middle with a new irrigation system and well, and also installing professional lighting and bleachers. So that's going to be a wonderful project. We just opened up bids for that last week, and we've awarded the contract, and I believe they'll probably start mobilizing next week. So the Bicentennial Track is number 2. And number 3 is the Pleasant Street Landfill. And this is a pretty unique project. I've never done one of these before, so I'm excited to be involved with it. So the town, everybody's familiar in Rockland with the recycling center down on Beach Street, which there was an old landfill that's been capped, and there's solar panels and et cetera up on top. Most people don't know there's another unused landfill called the Pleasant Street landfill, and that's up off of Pleasant Street and VFW Drive. So that's been discontinued for many, many, many years. As soon as I got here 7 years ago, I was told by our engineering firm that does the quarterly monitoring reports to make sure everything is safe there, that it's never been properly capped and lined. And the Department of Environmental Protection is going to require that, literally at any day now, to the tune of $5 to $10 million that taxpayers are going to have to come up with to make sure that facility is safe and properly capped. I've been pushing that off because we've had a lot of other priorities and we don't have funding available for that. And so we've come up with an innovative solution where we went out to bid through a request for proposals, and I've hired a contractor who is going to bring in additional material, additional fill, mainly from construction sites, things like that. And sometimes the word contaminated is used for the material they'll bring in, and I want to assure people that does not mean hazardous, does not mean unsafe. Everything will be highly regulated by the Department of Environmental Protection. But as part of this project, we'll allow this contractor to bring in lots of additional fill that needs to be disposed of and not charge them for that. So they'll be able to charge whoever is bringing the material in, and they'll generate a lot of revenue from bringing in this material. Then that company will take some of the profits from that process, and they will pay 100% of the costs to line and cap the landfill at zero cost to the town. Then in addition to that, they'll build us some amenities up on top, like, a dog park or just, passive open space, a fitness, trail, who knows, whatever it is we ask them to do. So this will be literally $5 to $10 million of cost avoidance, saving the Rockland taxpayers by coming up with a project like this. They'll profit from bringing in the fill, and they'll still have enough profits, left over after they do the work for us to have a net profit for themselves as well. And there's a number of examples of these types of projects in other areas up in Quincy and South Boston. But it's the first time I've been involved with this project, and we're just getting started with it, and it's going to be great for the community.
I was totally unaware of the Pleasant Street landfill. I've lived in Rockland for probably 20 years of my life. I lived in Rockland, totally unaware of it, went through the Rockland school system, had no clue that it was even there. So that's surprising to me to hear. I was watching a select board meeting, and I was totally unaware when you guys were talking about it. I was like, there's another landfill?
Right, because it's probably been closed for your entire lifetime, so you wouldn't have known about it, and there's really no signage there that would let people know. The one of the most important things I want the community to know, certainly those in Rockland, is that we're not just going to go ahead and just push this through without any community engagement. There's going to be a lot of community outreach, a lot of public outreach meetings where anybody, whether it's abutters or anyone in town, will be able to ask technical questions, understand what material is going to be coming in here, how many trucks, what time of day, what's the noise and traffic going to look like. We're going to make sure to have a lot of interaction with the public so this is not disruptive. But again, the ultimate work to cap it and line it must get done. And again, this is going to save Rockland taxpayers $5 to $10 million by having this public-private partnership.
Mm. One thing you touched on was the fire station up on Union Street being moved to the location of the McKinley School on Howard Street.
Lincoln School.
I'm sorry, Lincoln School, not McKinley School. What are the benefits to the residents of that being moved, and what will the building that was the fire department, what will that become? Is it going to be a substation?
Sure. I'll let you. Maybe I'll start with that last part because it relates. So we currently have this old fire station that is past its useful life. It's unsafe for the firefighters currently operating out of there, and there's a lot of liability that the town and thus taxpayers are facing by having this old unsafe building that we don't want to continue throwing good money after bad, kind of putting money down the drain by reinvesting in that site. When the project is ultimately done and the whole fire department moves out of that station into the new one and it's empty, I'll be going back to the select board and recommending that we put a town meeting warrant article before the next town meeting to get authorization to sell the fire station. And we would sell it through a request for proposals procurement, and we'd be able to define what types of uses we'd want the buyer to put in there. And so we'd obviously want it to be consistent with our zoning on Union Street, but something like, maybe a restaurant on the ground floor and maybe some, residential up above as an example of the type of thing. So one benefit to the community is we'd be offloading an old building that we can't maintain and is unsafe, and we'll be upgrading it with a new facility, but that old unsafe building is now going to get reinvested with a private developer, put back on the tax rolls. It's going to generate tax revenue. Whatever proceeds we get from that sale, we can actually directly apply to offset the debt for the new building, which will save taxpayers money. And they'll have whatever is constructed there. Like I said, maybe a restaurant or apartments or what have you. As far as the new building goes, I think one of the biggest benefits is, it's going to be a safer environment for our firefighters and paramedics. And that's really the most important thing. And when we have a safer environment, and also an environment that will have now a proper emergency operations center, proper room for training, all kinds of things that aren't able to happen now in the current station, they're going to be better equipped, better trained, healthier, in a safer environment. That's going to benefit them and the whole community.
How's the fire team feel about it and the chief?
Yeah, so obviously the chief is really, leading the charge on this project with us. I don't want to be presumptuous and claim that I could speak for every single firefighter, because I'm sure there's lots of different opinions. But I think in general, the firefighters and the union are very supportive of this project, because again, the number one thing that's driving this is to improve safety and the health of the firefighters that are working for the department. So I think in general they're very supportive.
Are there any challenges with this project?
Oh, sure. There's always challenges.
All right, let me rephrase.
Yeah, there's always challenges.
What challenges are with this project?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with saying, a benefit that we have is we're able to continue to operate out of our current station while we're constructing the new one. So many times with these types of projects, a challenge is you have to pay to set up some kind of temporary corridors and a temporary station while you demolish the current one and build a new one. We don't have that problem here, because we're going to stay in our current station until the new station's done, move in, then sell the old building. So that's one problem we don't have. The biggest problem, I'd say, I shouldn't even say problem, but just issue, is the budget, right? So the first time we went to taxpayers, really all of the feedback we got was that this is an important project and we need it. It was just too expensive. Voters felt like they just couldn't afford it. So we heard that feedback. We went back to the drawing board and we scaled the project back, made it smaller, made it less expensive, because that's what voters said they needed to be able to pass it, and we were ultimately successful with that. So by shrinking the building to make it less expensive, that of course does pose some challenges, because we've had to take away from the program. One thing, for example, that we were disappointed we had to cut out was a mechanics bay. So right now, really any work on the engines, even simple work like brakes and oil changes and things, we have to take it to a third party and pay those higher rates to get that work done. We had originally proposed a mechanics bay where we could have a firefighter that was also a mechanic do simple automotive repair on the engines and ambulances, and also work on some other vehicles in town. But again, because we had to shrink the square footage, we had to cut that back. So that's certainly going to be an issue. The biggest one really will just be the budget. So we have a fixed budget. It's $26.1 million. We will not go over, and we're not going to go back and ask for anything more. But the cost of construction has just been skyrocketing. And there are public projects now, and I stress public because we have to abide by the state's public construction law. And there's all kinds of technical things involved with that law that drives up the cost of construction. Prevailing wage rates, union wages have to be paid, even if the contractor that we hire is a non-union shop and generally, could do it for less. We still have to pay more because that's a state law. And there's lots of laws we have to abide by. Some recent public construction projects have been approaching $1,000 a square foot in our region. $1,000. I mean, that's
insane.
That's triple what it was, not too long ago. And again, we're at the mercy of the private sector. We have to follow the public construction law and go out to bid and, go with the lowest, responsible and eligible bidder. But costs have gone up. So we're in the process now of design development. We did a preliminary design. We had a third-party professional cost estimator review it and see where they thought it was going to come out at with the bids. And it estimated it came in too high. So we're shrinking it further. We're making further adjustments again, because we have to live within our budget. So that's probably going to be the most significant challenge that we face.
Changing topics a little bit, there's a subject that I've seen a lot of coverage on WRPS, and that's the PFAS. What is PFAS?
So I'm not going to even try to pronounce the chemical compounds that acronym makes up. It probably starts with a poly something or other.
Break it down in layman's terms.
So it's often they're referred to as forever chemicals, and they can come from a wide variety of sources. For all we know, the chair that we're sitting on could have a sprayed application, to prevent, stains if you, spill a glass of wine or something. Those kinds of Scotchgard type, furniture repellents, those can contain these forever chemicals. Plastic water bottles, Sharpie pens. I mean, there's so many sources of this. How it got into our drinking water from the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks, it's hard to trace back, exactly where all the different sources are. I've certainly heard anecdotally, and I just want to stress that these are an anecdote. I'm not making any kind of claim, but many years ago, Boston Whaler had a large manufacturing facility up near where the Home Depot is. A lot of fiberglass and other chemicals were used there, and they've since moved, and they're, I believe, out of Florida now. But those kinds of like heavy industrial manufacturing, those types of things can get into it too. So it's not just a Rockland issue; it's a national issue. Everywhere you go, it's an issue. Massachusetts, has very strict standards, and generally has been much more strict than the federal government. But I'm pleased to say that the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks, and for those that don't know, we're a little bit unique, and it probably comes from our history because Rockland used to be part of Abington. We have a joint water department, one department that serves both towns. They've been doing a tremendous amount of work to address PFAS in our drinking water to make sure that we can fully comply with even the most stringent Massachusetts standards. And they've recently invested over $26 million, 13 million from Rockland, 13 million from Abington, to construct these giant, they call them vessels, these giant tanks with carbon filters that literally filters out the PFAS. So it's been a massive project. They've had different engineering firms and construction firms helping them with this. But I'm pleased to say the latest information, today it's June of 2026, it's fully online and it's working 100%. And the PFAS has been taken care of in the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks. The water, it's always been safe because again, people sometimes would want to go buy bottled water because they were concerned about the PFAS, coming from the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks. But the Joint Waterworks water is tested. We know exactly, what the levels are. If you buy a bottled water from a convenience store,
you don't know where it's from.
You have no idea where it's from. And generally, there's PFAS leaching into it from the water bottle itself, and microplastics.
Wow.
So it's actually, the Rockland water is safer, but it is fully online. And any questions, the technical stuff, the Joint Waterworks is always happy to answer questions, and they have a lot of information on their website about it.
You just totally took the next question out of my brain here, because I was gonna ask, what is Rockland doing to counteract the PFAS? But it seems like
it has been addressed.
It's already in the process of working.
And that's one of the reasons why people have seen their water rates go up. And that's because the Joint Waterworks has increased the rates because the water department is what we call an enterprise fund, meaning it's not part of the general fund. It's not supported by property taxes. It's a fully self-sufficient little mini business where the water rates, the rates that they charge for customers, has to fully support all of their operations. And so knowing that they were going to be incurring $26 million of debt, so they have to pay the debt service on that for 20 years, that's one of the reasons why they've had to raise the rates to customers so they can pay off that debt, which is what funded the construction of that project.
Will PFAS even be a conversation with the new tanks that we have? Will it be a conversation that we have in 10 years, or will this just sort of die out?
I don't think it will be. I think what could happen, and I'm not a water expert.
Sure.
I don't claim to be.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if, maybe not under the current federal administration, but maybe a different administration that has a little bit of a stronger environmental bend, there could be different chemical compounds that get added to the list of things that have to be, screened and addressed. So the PFAS might be taken care of, but something else could come up in its place that's the next chemical that has to be addressed.
Could you talk a bit about the McCarthy Farm acquisition?
Sure. That has been a really exciting project that we've completed, and now we're actually onto a phase 2, which I can also touch on. So the McCarthy Farm was an active farm down at the southern end of town on Beach Street across from the recycling center. Off the top of my head, I think it's probably around 30 acres. So it was an active farm, and as a result of the fact that they were doing active agriculture, they applied to the town and received for many years property tax breaks because of their agricultural use, and that's consistent with state law. But part of that law that allows them to apply for and us to give these agricultural tax breaks is that if at any point in the future they want to develop the property for some other purpose, they need to give the town the right of first refusal first. And that's what happened in this case. So several years ago, the the heirs to the farm, the property owners, were looking to develop it, and they had a private developer come in, and they were planning what's referred to as a 40B affordable housing project on site. But again, as conditioned by the law, they had to give the town the right of first refusal. And that was always something that we've been looking to expand our open space acquisitions and make sure they're connected to other open space parcels. So that was something we were very interested in, both because we wanted the open space and also that particular housing project would not have been a very good fit there, and we didn't really have the infrastructure to support it. So we had to do some very, very quick, heavy lifting, and I'm really proud of what we as a team were able to accomplish. We applied for and received a $400,000 grant from the state, which was intended for these types of projects. We ultimately acquired the property. I think it was around $900,000, something like that. And again, $400,000 of that we were able to cover from a state grant, and the remainder we got using Community Preservation Act funds. So that's been a wonderful acquisition, really improved our open space stock. So that's been fully completed. We own that. And we have some trails that we built and we're going to maintain. We have a parking lot we constructed. We have a kiosk with a trail map. And now most recently, this past May, so just a little over a month ago, we acquired an additional 30 acres directly abutting that along Beach Street. And it was formerly known as the Camp Alice Carlton. So that was a girls' camp that was privately owned for many years. And this is really a very unusual, very, very unusual situation. When that property was most recently disposed of, the former owners of the camp, the landowners, gifted it to the town of Whitman. So the town of Whitman actually owned this 30-acre parcel in the town of Rockland. And it's very unusual. Oftentimes communities will have state-owned land in their towns, but it's not that often that you'll have land owned by a neighboring municipality. So Whitman approached us, I don't know exactly when, I'd have to go back and look in my notes, maybe a year or so ago. And they were interested in selling it to the town of Rockland. And so they had a lot of internal debate in the town of Whitman, whether it should be, developed for some purpose or preserved as open space. They ultimately had a town meeting vote that specifically authorized them to sell it only to the town of Rockland and only on the condition that it be set aside as permanent deed restricted open space, so it couldn't be developed, and also on the condition that the conservation restriction on the McCarthy farm right next to it, and a conservation restriction is just a legal document that in perpetuity requires that it be set aside as open space and can't be redeveloped. So the town of Whitman's vote was also conditioned on us expanding that McCarthy farm conservation restriction so it encompasses both parcels. So we went before town meeting this past May, got approval to acquire that property, which passed. So we're really excited about that. And we're actually going to have on our select board agenda this upcoming Tuesday night, June 16th, the board's going to vote to formally accept the deed from Whitman. So we're just, now that the votes have passed, we're just working our way through the procedural, purchase and sale, closing, deed, etc. And once that's all effectuated, there's a little bit of cleanup we have to do with the property, remove some junk and other things. And then similarly, we're going to connect it to the McCarthy Farm trails, and it's going to double our open space inventory in that part of town.
Wow. Who maintains these properties?
Great question. So, one of the struggles that we have in Rockland is our lack of staff. We're very understaffed in a number of areas, and one of them is in this particular area. So we don't have a Department of Natural Resources, which most other properly staffed towns do. So if we had a DNR, Department of Natural Resources, we'd have their we'd have their staff maintain it, or maybe some temporary summer staff. So in lieu of that, we have our Parks Department, which is just literally a handful of guys, and we have a Highway Department. And so between the two, and we have volunteers. We have an Open Space Committee and some other volunteers in town. So it's kind of a collaborative effort. Parks, Highway, and volunteers from the Open Space Committee have been helping so far.
Now, there's so many projects. We didn't even really touch on the bicentennial project. When did this come up, and where are we in the process of the bicentennial track?
The track, sure. Yeah, very excited about that one. So it's, it's called the Bicentennial Track. So it was obviously built in 1976. But it's been, what's the best way to say it? It's in poor condition, and it's really been unsafe, and it's been decertified for use. So it hasn't been used for a school track meet in many, many, many years. So that's been, since the day I started 7 years ago, that's been on the list that people have told me, we got to find a way to rebuild the track someday. And so it's, every year, it's been asked. And again, we've had other priorities that we've been looking at. But ultimately, through lots of different input from people that, made this a priority, we took this on. We got Community Preservation Act funding to do a feasibility study to look at, what this project could look like. And then we ultimately went to town meeting and got the project approved, again, through the Community Preservation Act, all in total costs about $3 million. And one of the things I'll say about the project is it's physically going to be a tricky project to build because the site is very constrained, and it's constrained partly by its size. There's just not a lot of room, but there's also extensive wetlands around the side and the back of the project. So we have very little wiggle room to be able to do this properly. We went to the Conservation Commission to make sure we follow the Wetlands Protection Act like we require of any other project. We went before them on several occasions, and so we ended up ultimately shifting the orientation. If anybody goes and looks at the track in the field now and then compares it to what it looks like when it's done, you'll see it's kind of shifting a little bit. I think it's southwest to be a little bit further away from the buffer zones outside of the wetlands. But bottom line is it's going to have a brand new track, a new grass athletic field in the middle with a new well and a new irrigation system. It's going to have really professional high-grade lighting for nighttime events and bleachers. So it's going to be fantastic. And yeah, we're very excited about it.
Yeah, when I ran track in high school for Rockland, we never had a home track meet. We always dreamed of it. We were always brainstorming, can we make this work? Can we make that work? But ultimately it's, when you go to neighboring towns who have brand new facilities, they're just gorgeous.
It wasn't safe to have a track meet. There's just so many potholes and cracks and other issues. And now once this is done, Rockland will be able to host track meets again. We made sure on our project team to include the high school track coach so she could help the engineer with a design and make sure we were adding the different things that she would need to run an effective track and field event. And I want to highlight it's track and field. We're looking at, high jump, long jump, shot put, all those other discus, all that stuff. That's all going to be built into the program. So again, we just went out to bid. We have awarded the contract. They're going to start mobilizing, I believe, next week. It's not going to get done this season, so they're going to work up until the winter as long as they can, and then they'll finish it off next spring.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
With all these projects, fire, PFAS, track, how do you decide what gets priority over what? How do you pick and choose projects?
Yeah,
Is it even possible to do that, or do you just sort of have to go at the same time with everything?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, before I answer that, because I have a specific answer, there's a concern that often gets brought up, and this happens in every town and other towns I've worked in, where, a project is a priority. And we present that to voters, and voters can understandably say, hey, hold on, okay, we understand this is a priority and you want us to pay for it, but what other projects are out there that are priorities, so that we're not just, voting on things in isolation, because maybe I want to know what the next one is and the next one after that, and to make a decision if I can afford everything or not. So then the discussion pivots from that one project to, okay, here are the next several things that are going to be coming down the line, whether it's, water infrastructure improvements, sewer infrastructure improvements, roads, fire station, track, you name it. And so then what often happens is once we give the comprehensive list of everything we want to accomplish over the next 10 years or whatever, then people get overwhelmed and they're like, holy cow, we can't afford all that. And then it just vote no, and then we're back to square one and rinse and repeat, and that cycle goes round and round again. So that can be a difficult thing to overcome. And so what we try to explain to voters is, we have to multitask, we have to also prioritize, and we can't get overwhelmed by the fact that there may have been 50 years of inactivity and neglect from the previous, generations that may not have reinvested in our community, and we have to step up and take things on, as they come up. So so that's a long way of answering your question, which is the first place we always look is our capital plan. We have a capital planning committee. Every town has a capital committee, and it's a wonderful group of people in Rockland. They do a great job with it. And they meet, the process starts with every year in the fall when we're working on the budget. I send out capital request forms to every department head. And it could be, for things as small as a new truck, in the highway department, or for something as large as a new fire station, from the fire chief, and everything in between. So they submit these requests, and I forward all these requests to the capital planning committee. They review them all. They interview each department head to make sure they understand what the request is. They have a defined scoring mechanism where they will score and rank each project in order of priority based on all their criteria. Is it going to save money, increase efficiency? Is it necessary for health and safety? All those kinds of things. They rank them, and then they put them on the capital plan. So that is a physical document that lists all of our priorities, all of our needs going forward for the next 5 years. And that gets formally voted. That document's available on the town website. And in fact, any capital item or project that's $50,000 or more and has a useful life of more than several years has to be on the capital plan in order for town meeting to be able to vote on it. That's a unique thing in the Rockland Charter and bylaws. So the capital plan is always the first place I go. And then other than that, then it comes to priorities that are presented to me or that I'm aware of. So it could be coming from a department head, it could be coming from the select board, could be coming from members of the community, or just my own knowledge and understanding about what the needs are.
Yeah. What grants has Rockland pursued, received successfully in the past year or so, maybe 2026?
Yeah.
Is there any highlights that we should know about?
Yeah, there's a ton, and I thought you might ask that, so I even have a list, but I won't pull it out. Even though you asked for the past year, I want to go back a couple of years because this one's a really good one. The Phelps Elementary School, that was a big project. We got what is essentially a $35 million grant from the state. So that, town meeting voted to authorize us to spend $86 million. The project came in under budget. Again, because of the timing, or I talked about some of the cost increases. This was bid, before some of the latest round of cost increases. The actual project came in closer to $72 million, around there. About half of that was fully funded by the state through a grant from the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority. So that's obviously the biggest, one of the most high-profile ones. More recently, we've received we're always working on grants. We got $1 million grant from the state Mass Works program to rebuild and improve Hingham Street. As anybody knows, when you get off of Route 3 and you're coming into Rockland, as you're going in toward the center, it's 2 lanes for a while, and then it shrinks down to 1 lane, and there's confusion and congestion, and then it opens back up. So we got $1 million to help design a complete reconstruction, widening the road, sidewalks, curbing, landscaping, new traffic signals to help the traffic turning flow. We're going to apply for additional, once the design is complete, we're going to go back to MassWorks again and apply for additional grants for construction. We're on the list right now, we're on the list right now for the Mass Department of Transportation's Transportation Improvement Program. It's called the TIP. And we're looking to completely rebuild all of VFW Drive from Union Street all the way up to the town line. It turns into Weymouth Street up into Hingham. We've been putting money into the design of that project, hoping to get that grant, which will probably save us $14 million once we get that approved. And we're on the list, and we keep working our way up. And those that go to town meeting will notice periodically we have capital articles for several $100,000 looking to continue that design, because we need the design to be at a certain level before the state will approve it. Other grants we recently received, we got about a $900,000 grant from the state to look at additional wastewater discharge sites, because where our wastewater treatment plant is down off of Summer Street, we're at capacity. The state, the federal government is never going to increase the permit for how much effluent can go into French's Stream. So we need to look at other areas. We got a $900,000 grant for that. We also just got another $1 million grant at our sewer department from the feds, which is going to just allow us to do additional wastewater treatment plant upgrades at the plant. So we could go on and on, but there's a lot, and the community should really rest assured we're always actively looking at grants.
You're dealing with tens of millions of dollars, up to $86 million for the new Phelps School. What are some of these things that might keep you up at night? Are there any projects that keep you up at night that you might sit down at the desk at home and you're like, I got to work on this. What are some of those projects or some of those things that keep you up?
So the way I'm interpreting your question, keep me up, meaning it's something that I'm like nervous about and stressed about and right. Yeah. So to be honest, those specific projects like that, those capital projects generally don't keep me up at night because, if they fail, if voters, reject them, then the voters have decided and we're not moving forward with that and we'll have to make do. And if voters do approve them, I've been in local government management for 21 years. I've done a lot of projects. I'm very confident in managing projects and most importantly, in bringing in the right consultants and experts to help me. So with the fire station project, we have an outstanding independent owner's project manager. We have an outstanding team of architects that help us and an internal staff team that's helping us guide the process. So I have no worries about that. What really does, other than the budget, which we will adjust and make sure that we live with. What keeps me up at night, I'd say really are two things. One is the regular operating budget. This year was the most difficult financial year I've had in Rockland in 7 years. I talked about it as like the perfect storm. That we had, horrible winter with a ton of snow and a $1 million deficit in our snow and ice account. We had essentially zero increase in state aid, and Rockland is relatively dependent on state aid compared to a lot of our other neighbors because of our demographics and the finances of our town. So we had essentially no increase at all in state aid. Our Plymouth County retirement assessments have been crushing, not just us, but every town in the community, going up by $500,000 a year. There's millions of dollars a year that we have to figure out a way to afford within our levy limit to fund these increases. And it's a temporary thing because once we get to FY32, it's going to be fully funded. Then we'll have a lot more levy capacity, but it's just very, very difficult to get there. And then on top of all of those financial constraints, we had a horrible year with health insurance. We're fully insured, but on our own. We're not in a group. And our former health insurer was Blue Cross, and they were proposing a 20% increase year over year in our health insurance premiums. That health insurance increase alone was more than our entire Proposition 2.5 revenue increase that we can get in the year, plus all of our new growth that adds to our Prop 2.5 increase, plus all of our state aid increases. Just health insurance alone blew all that out. So then on top of that, of course, we have to cover cost of living adjustments for employees, increases in utilities and property and liability insurance and all these other things. So the whole Prop 2.5 model is really kind of broken. All of our costs, look at general inflation in the community now. Look at the average cost of a new car is $50,000, So living with only a 2.5% year over year increase in revenue makes that incredibly challenging. So we figured it out. We did a lot of drastic actions and we balanced our budget without the need for a tax increase. That keeps me up. That kept me up a lot this fall. The other thing would be, which I can't really get into any details, but like every community, we're a big municipal corporation. We get sued sometimes. There's litigation, or there could be, personnel matters that, involve litigation. And those can keep me up at night because despite the fact that we always do the right thing and we always have the intent to do the right thing, you never know how some of these legal judgments can turn out. And so that's the other thing that I'd say is can be very stressful and can keep me up.
What project right now is Rockland going to be benefiting the most in 50 years? Actually in 2050.
Yeah.
So 25 or 24 years.
Yeah. To be honest, I really think the fire station it probably meets that. I mean, the track, I'm not talking about the track as much because that's a recreational amenity, that's certainly going to be, going to be wonderful for the community, but it's not a public safety issue. And, the landfill, the Pleasant Street landfill, financially, one way or the other, we were going to have to get that done. But creating a safer environment for our public safety, for our firefighters and paramedics to live and train and work, having a better facility where they're able to train better and serve the public in a more effective and efficient manner. And we're going to build it in a way where this building is going to last, and we're going to try to build out as much additional capacity for more staff, because we know this won't be the staffing level forever. Someday in the future, we will likely need, to hire more firefighters as the town continues to grow, and we're going to build that in. So that station's going to be ready 50 years from now. And I think the community will be really proud of what we build.
Thank you for joining me, Doug. I appreciate it.
You bet. Anytime.
This has been Seth Rosczewski After Hours. If you enjoyed this chat, be sure to check out Seth Rosczewski podcast on YouTube. A link will be in the description below, where I sit down with my co-host Rich Little, where we analyze true crime with experts, authors, and other creators here on YouTube. I will be talking to you guys. Have a good one. Thank you.